Now we're going to be going to our correspondent Pierre Steckelbach, who is in southern Israel for updates. And before we do that, though, I'd like to welcome our guests in studio. Colonel in the Reserves, Advocate Penina Sharvit Baruch, Senior Researcher at the Institute for National Security Studies and member of the Forum Devora, Women in Foreign Policy and National Security, and the former head of the IDF International Law Division. Thank you so much. And political commentator Daniel Sheck, former Israeli ambassador to France. Thank you both so much for being here. So many developments happening at once, and as I said earlier, we will be going to our team on the ground for the latest developments there. But first, I'd like your take on the latest developments inside the Gaza Strip. We know the IDF is focusing its attention right now on Khan Yunis, and that is hugely significant because of the people who are believed to be in tunnels underground, the Hamas leaders, and also complicating all matters right now, the fact that many hostages are believed, not confirmed, but believed to be there too. Your assessment?
So on the one hand, in order to reach the outcome of eliminating the military capabilities of Hamas, the ability of the Hamas to continue to control the Gaza Strip, which is the end outcome that we have to get out of this operation. Israel cannot continue to live side by side this element, this threat in the Gaza Strip. There is no other way but to really go after the heads and the central focus of the Hamas, which is at the moment in Khan Yunis.
I'm going to stop you right now because on our screen we are seeing live rocket launches happening in the south, in the Gaza envelope area. This happening moments ago. You could see those interceptions right there on our screen. That appears to be the Iron Dome missile defense system intercepting rockets heading right now towards southern parts of the country. Continue.
Yeah, so if anybody had a doubt what Hamas is all about the destruction of the state of Israel, attacking civilians in Israel, both what he did on the 7th of October with horrendous crimes, but both through firing rockets. And they also have they declare their aim is to destroy the state of Israel, and they continue doing so as long as they can. So we have to get rid of this terrorist element that has controlled the Gaza Strip since 2007. And the only way is by going into this densely populated area, and we have many Palestinian civilians there, and we have potential hostages there, which means that the forces have to act very carefully. Air power has to be used very carefully. The ground forces have to maneuver carefully. But whatever they will do, they will still be casualties, and we have to be aware of that. There might also be potential casualties among hostages, hopefully not, and they're using as much intelligence as possible in order to avoid this outcome. And they might also be civilian casualties under Palestinian civilian casualties, but we have to understand again that this is because of this tactic of Hamas of using civilian infrastructure for all their military operations, operating in tunnels underneath civilian infrastructure, and using civilians as shields and preventing them from leaving areas even when they are warned to do so. So Israel really doesn't have any option of, on the one hand, dismantling the military capabilities of Hamas, and on the other hand, sparing completely civilians in Gaza. And therefore, when civilians are harmed, that doesn't mean that Israel is carrying out a war crime. The laws of war acknowledge that this outcome could happen even and still be lawful.
Something we're going to unpack very shortly, but right now, as promised, let's go to our correspondent Pierre Steckelbach. She joins us from southern Israel, and as we started this broadcast at the top of the hour, sirens sounding in some parts of the south. What can you see? What can you tell us? What is the latest, Pierre?
Right, Benita. Well, actually, we could see that rocket being launched from Gaza and like rising up in the air. We could see it from here where we are at. It was right behind us, and then we could also see the interceptor missile launched by the Iron Dome and also intercepting that missile there. The communities of both Sad and Kfar Aza had red alert, had rocket alert, and that is basically the picture that you had here throughout the day. On a quite regular basis, rockets were launched towards exactly these Gaza border communities. They also got as far as Terot and Ashkelon, not causing any casualties, but for example, instead causing some damage to some infrastructure there. Yesterday night, we also saw an example of Hamas still being able to launch rockets towards the center of Israel, towards Tel Aviv. We haven't seen that yet tonight as of now, but really throughout the day, rocket fire coming out of Gaza, targeting the southern communities here that are widely evacuated still, Benita.
We also saw on our screens just moments ago that interception, Pierre. We could see the Iron Dome missile defense system actually intercepting that incoming rocket as well. We also, earlier on in the broadcast, saw dramatic images coming across from the Gaza Strip. It seemed to be flares. What is known about the latest on the ground there? What can you share?
Right, Benita. Well, we do know that the Israeli military is pushing further down south. We do know that the Israeli ground troops are now just north of Khan Yunis in the south. We also know that the Israeli military is calling upon more civilians to evacuate now after the end of the ceasefire. Israel has basically divided the entire Gaza Strip into blocks. Now, the Israeli army spokesperson Arabic has called upon certain neighborhoods of Khan Yunis, of that southern city that the Israeli ground troops are approaching, to evacuate. In addition to that, also areas in Gaza City and also in the center of the Gaza Strip were asked to evacuate, as of course the fighting continues from the air and also, as we know, on the ground. And the military's goal was to get to Hamas targets in the entire Gaza Strip. Now we do know that they're pushing further down south, which leaves a lot of Gazan civilians without any idea where to go, because we do know that the facilities, the locations that are deemed to be safe, such as UN schools, are completely overwhelmed, and many people are just left asking themselves where they should go. But the Israeli army has has a plan in place, the evacuation plan, to minimize civilian casualties. But obviously the humanitarian catastrophe is intensifying in Gaza. Also, as the Israeli establishment has said, that this war will not be over unless the targets are fulfilled, which are, of course, to demolish Hamas and to bring the 137 hostages back that are believed to be in Gaza as of now.
Thank you so much. We will be coming back to our correspondent Pierre Steckelbach in southern Israel. Appreciate the update. Stay safe. And from the south to the north, let's go straight to our correspondent Zach Anders. He joins us from northern Israel, and sirens also sounding earlier up north. What can you tell us? What developments are happening on the ground?
Well, in the last hour, we had a red alert for a community in the southern Golan Heights. We're still waiting for confirmation as to what exactly this was, but the IDF has already clarified that they believe that something was fired from Syria and that was the cause of the red alert here. Now, there were over 5 different launches that Hezbollah took credit for today along this northern front, with scores injured. As many as 12 are reported to be injured. We're waiting for IDF confirmation on the status of each individual. They did say earlier in the day, when they first reported that several soldiers were injured, that they were lightly wounded by some of the shrapnel that was the result of this ATGM, anti-tank guided missile fire, on their position. But later in the day, they clarified that the casualty figure rose and that it also included civilians. So we're still waiting for the confirmation as to the level of severity with each individual injury. But it is another day here marked by a significant fire along the north since this ceasefire ended. And during the ceasefire, it was much quieter, as Hezbollah claimed that they were adhering to the ceasefire as well, even though they weren't party to it. It was considerably quieter, and now it has heated up once again, just as it was before the ceasefire.
We were talking earlier, Zach, in studio, now that the tenuous truce has been broken, Hamas violating the pause on Friday, is Hassan Nasrallah, and by extension Iran, likely to ramp up its role in the war in the coming weeks? What are experts saying? What is the sense on the ground up north?
Well, in speaking to one of the sources that I have in Beirut, it does not appear that there has been significant changes in Hezbollah's structure of moving personnel and men. But you also have to include that caveat that many of the Hezbollah fighters, members, whatever you want to call them, did move south or start to congregate in the south of Lebanon before this ceasefire began. And that's been a consistent story for some time now. So if there there was to be any indication based on movement of personnel and equipment. That would be difficult to say. Of course, the intelligence situation here is masked on both sides. The IDF not revealing what they see, and Hezbollah not revealing their positions or their movement. We do see a steady amount of observation balloons here on the north with these high-range cameras that are all focused and pointed towards positions all across the northern border. But as the IDF presence has grown and secured here along the border, it does appear that Hezbollah has somewhat moved a little bit deeper inside Lebanon, at least with their firing positions of these heavy rockets that are being launched sometimes several miles beyond that border, the southern border of Lebanon, inside the interior of these mountainous, regionous villages throughout the southern border here with Lebanon. So it is hard to be able to determine independently with observational reports alone to be able to show any sort of status or readiness for Hezbollah. But you can take perhaps the IDF's position up here and the serious number of equipments and troops that are staged on the Israeli side as an indication that they do see a significant threat here.
Thank you so much. Correspondent Zach Anders live from northern Israel. More to come from Zach in the coming hours. And Daniel Sheikh, I'd like to bring you in here on all these developments we're hearing at the moment. On the one hand, there's rocket fire still coming from the Gaza Strip, despite the operation underway, heading towards southern communities largely evacuated. On the other hand, up north, there are also the developments Zach is outlining. And of course, top of mind for everybody, what this all means in terms of the hostages, 137 still being kept captive by Hamas at this hour inside the Gaza Strip.
First of all, let me say this. Although you described sort of similar situation on both ends of the state of Israel, the truth is that the situation is not the same. In Gaza, it's an all-out war. On the Lebanese border, it's sort of a cat-and-mouse game between Israel and Hezbollah. Hezbollah trying to keep Israel on its toes, but nobody actually crossing certain boundaries that were not established, obviously, but that both sides for the moment seem to respect, with all the risks that such a situation, especially if it's prolonged, brings with it, because something can go wrong, and without any intent from either side, Israel or Hezbollah, we can find ourselves in an all-out war on the Lebanese.
A concern that has been raised for many weeks.
So it's good to remind that. Now, of course, obviously, the hostage situation is less impacted by the northern border, but what's happening in the southern border, and maybe even more importantly, what's happening much east of here in Doha, in Qatar, is of great concern to the families of hostages for obvious reasons. There are at least the official negotiations have broken down, and there doesn't seem to be anything on the close horizon.